Thank you, Chair. I wanted to address the committee as one of the city councillors representing St Peter's ward in relation to the report and consultation on the pump track. Obviously, we've already heard a lot about that this evening already, so I don't want to kind of go over all the arguments we've already heard. But I think it may perhaps be useful to just mention a few things. This was a project which initiated with a former city councillor and the parish council, and in what you might say was the old-fashioned politics of allocating funds before needs assessment and community engagement had been done. So when I became city councillor in St Peter's, I found that the proposal and location had already been decided, but no residents had actually even been spoken to. Alina and myself have been sort of engaged with, garnering the mood of the public in St Peter's, not just residents who are close to the park, but also young people as to whether this is something that they want. None of this information comes in the report, of course, because it's not part of the official consultation. But we have certainly heard from young people who really want a pump track. We've heard from young people who are indifferent about it because they don't think they'd use it. We've heard from residents who, as you have heard, are concerned about various impacts that the particular location that has been suggested would have upon them and the park and the environment. We also hear from people who, want one as quickly as possible and feel that the delays that have already occurred are unacceptable, and that any further delay would be disastrous for the generation of young people that are growing up in St Peter's now. I think, from my perspective, having spoken to residents, having spoken to young people, having done my own survey back in 2022, I think that we want a good solution both for St Peter's and we want a good solution for Worcester City. My personal opinion is that pump tracks are a fantastic community resource that can be used by all ages, and that Worcester City is well behind the curve on this compared to other places in terms of these kind of facilities. So the quicker we can implement these things, the more pump tracks that we can have, so that children can access them, children and young people can access them from their homes by active travel, the better. I think that having a pump track in St Peter's would be fantastic. I think that there are other locations within St Peter's that would be as good, if not better. And I think that they were not considered seriously enough by the parish council in the very early stages, and so were never brought forward to the city council in a proper manner to consider what is right for the local community. I do also think that we need a destination type facility as well, and I think that there are at least 2, if not 3 locations in Worcester City that could be successfully implemented. So I don't think we've heard anybody who has said something negative about pump tracks, and I think that the council officers and members are now much more well informed than they were 2 years ago, which is a big step forward. Funding, there is allocation for funding, and the officers have quotations and understanding of impacts. I think that we need to kind of move forward with this as quickly as possible to implement what will suit the city and St Peter's, and I think that is a pump track in St Peter's in an alternative location and a destination pump track as the minimum for the whole of Worcester City. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. As has been mentioned already, Chair, this project or this concept started out around delivery of a pump track within the St Peter's ward, and £60,000 has been made available within the capital programme in order to fund it. Following initial consultation with ward councillors at the time, the location was identified within the park, and that's the location we've obviously carried out further investigation on, and that location is contained within the report as part of a plan. Back in July last year, this committee approved the Worcester Play Plan, and also it approved progression of further work on what we're calling first phase priority projects, and the Battenhall pump track is one of these. What the report has tried to do is present the further work that's been undertaken, because one of the jobs of us was to bring a business case back to members. So what we're talking about is primarily two elements to the project. The first is installation of a pump track, and we would regard this as an entry-level pump track, suitable for participants of all ages and skill levels, and in doing so that would make it more accessible and inclusive to those that are using adaptive bikes or wheelchairs or bikes or scooters. And that pump track is around 50 metres by 20 metres in dimension. We've undertaken a procurement exercise at no risk, and from the capital allocation of £60,000, at current costs, we know a pump track can be installed within that funding envelope. In addition to the £60,000, we've also identified some Section 106 monies, and that will provide some extra facilities, including benches, a notice board, some surfacing work around the track, just to make it look that bit nicer. Initial advice from planning was that because the track was of a certain scale, then no planning application was required for it, and it will be allowed under permitted development rights. Just in terms of tying it back into the Worcester Play Plan, even though the proposal predated development of the Play Plan, there is some under-provision that's been identified within that ward. So there's a small amount of under-provision for young people, and that affects a number of residential properties on Battenhall Drive. There are 3 existing play sites within close proximity of the project location, but those play sites are very predominantly located at much younger children, rather than sort of those into teen years. And the nearest site for youth play is the multi-games use area at the rear of St Peter's Village Hall. It's also worth pointing out that in terms of emerging demand, those sites that have been developed or will be developed in the future, so I'm thinking about Broomhall Way, 90-odd units of accommodation there, and further land to the south of the A440, they will be linked to St Peter's and the Battenhall ward by the Broomhall Way footbridge. So there will be further demand that will come, and that will require play provision. What we've acknowledged though as officers is that if this was the first pump track location for Worcester, it would very likely become a destination site in the absence of any other site. And obviously, as a destination site, it would be more preferable if it came with supporting infrastructure, which Battenhall Park doesn't contain at the moment. In terms of environmental impact, on the 14th of November 2023, a preliminary ecology appraisal was undertaken from members of Worcestershire Wildlife Consultancy, and there were no concerns that were raised that required any further survey work to be undertaken. There were some minor recommendations for consideration should the pump track proceed, and if at some future date that the proposal comes to fruition, then the findings of that report will be presented to members. In terms of planning, the most recent planning advice is that we would need to undertake some further survey work on the site. It is a site of historical interest in respect of archaeological monuments, And although that's not a deal breaker, it's something we will need to factor in if we were to move forward with that site. So that would add a bit of cost, a bit of time, possibly a bit of complication, but something that was brought to our attention quite late on in the process. In terms of parking access and welfare facilities, as I've said, the site is restricted, so there's no formal parking provision available, and any users to the site would probably need to park in one of the 4 residential areas, all of which I believe are cul-de-sacs. However, pedestrian and cycle access is good. There are 9 pedestrian access points into the park. The park is traversed by a city local cycling route, and obviously the national cycling route almost sort of skirts a huge sort of periphery of the site as well. In terms of emergency service vehicles, there is a sort of formal point of entry into the park. Vehicles can come so far, but then equipment has to be manually transported for that final leg of the journey. And as I mentioned, Battenall Park doesn't benefit from any public toilet facilities or a cafe, and such sites don't require them. But again, just to mention that if this was to become a destination site, then the number of people attending and perhaps some of the distances they would be coming from, they would be the sorts of things that sort of just add value to such a site. In terms of the public consultation, it was a heavily used consultation, probably one of the highest turnouts that we've had in terms of the consultations that we tend to run as a council. 65.1% of respondents classify themselves as local residents, and 46.9% of respondents signal that they lived in the immediate vicinity of Battenall Park. So that provides some strength as to who was responding to it and the sort of stake they have in that area. 60% of respondents said they would use the facility at various frequencies, from most days, 1 to 2 days per week, up to a few times a month, whilst 40% of respondents said they would never use it. However, 65% of respondents answered that they felt the track was in the right location. And although most respondents were supportive of pump track at the location, it was clear that there was local opposition to it. And the reasons cited range from noise, antisocial behaviour, litter, damage, and impact on wildlife and biodiversity. As I mentioned earlier, we've undertaken a procurement exercise. And as it stands, based on current estimates, the capital allocation has been provided for the project. We believe that can be delivered within that capital programme. However, in terms of where we are with the recommendation, officers are very conscious that if this was to be the first priority project delivered as part of our Worcester Play Plan, that is meant to be a very, very positive project for the council that the majority of people can get behind and support. And we feel, with a mixture of the practical considerations, if this site was to become a destination site, and that sort of micro-local opposition, being pragmatic, is that where we want to be for our first council play plan project? So the recommendation in front of members this evening is to defer the decision on Battenall Park, and that would allow officers to undertake further investigation work on alternative sites, and some of those have been listed within the report this evening, enabling then officers to bring a report back to committee that would present an options appraisal on a number of sites, and that may allow members to think about the ordering of play sites, and that could be one, that could be more than one, but it may allow us to think about a destination site first, and then a neighbourhood type site. So I think that's probably enough, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lloyd. Just two things I'd like to clarify before I open up to the committee. If the recommendations were to be agreed this evening, that does not mean the end of wheels-based play provision in St Peter's.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So the concept of a pump track within the St Peter's ward is still the focus of officers, and you'll see within the report that one of the other locations within the St Peter's ward is Power Park.
Thank you for that. And then on the survey itself, on the consultation, or in the consultation responses themselves, there are worrying allegations that the consultation system was being gamed. Are we taking any steps to try and reduce that opportunity?
I think we've certainly noted that, Chair. I think our current consultation software is sort of brittle to that type of issue, and we're now looking at how we can sort of upgrade that or provide a new consultation software that limits the potential for misuse.
Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment to the recommendations, but I'm not sure of the procedure for me to do that. Should I propose the amendment now and explain my reasoning, or explain my reason and propose the amendment?
I guess we need to hear the amendment, then take a seconder, and then hear your argument for your amendment, and then we'll take a vote on the amendment, if that's all right.
That this committee approves a pump track at Buttonhole Park on the condition that officers work with residents living closest to the location to address concerns relating to antisocial behaviour, environmental concerns, and instructs officers to undertake work to investigate further locations across the city, including within St. Peter's ward.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder for that? Adrian, thank you. Sorry, Jessie, you must now speak in defence of your amendment.
So first of all, I want to thank all the speakers that came here today. I know how hard it is to fit everything you want to say in 5 minutes. And I am very grateful to be in a position of not having that same restrictions, but I'll be as brief as I can. I believe that young people in this country are getting a raw deal, and if we continue in the current political trajectory, most of our young people will never be able to afford a home, will never be able to secure a job, and I realize that doesn't seem related, but a lot of the decisions that we made often ignore young people due to political practicalities. I'm aware that many students that I teach will graduate with thousands of pounds worth of student debt, and yes, before anyone says it, I am aware of the Lib Dems' role in that fiasco. I was not a Lib Dem then, and I would have left the party over this issue if I hadn't been able to persuade my party. And there are times that politicians have to choose between what they believe is the right thing and loyalty to their own parties and what the parties might want to do. No political party is blameless when ignoring the young because it's easier, because they don't often vote or complain. And it is not a secret that in the local council, we're often elected by middle-aged, golden-age people who own their own homes, and inevitable that NIMBYs will always have the loudest voices. To me, this pump track is a very clear symbol that everything that's wrong with politics, we all know it would be great for young people, but it is obvious to me that the practicalities of winning an election in May will get in the way of this. Make no mistake, whatever ward this pump track goes to, it will face loud, informed opposition from a handful of people who know how to multiply their voice. If we do not make progress on this today, none of us can guarantee that it will actually happen. We're all up for re-election. We don't know who's going to be in this chamber next time it meets. So we really have to make progress on this. I'm not very happy that the data that we are using anonymous surveys to be considered in this proposal, particularly with the allegations of multiple submissions. I've tried the system myself and found that it's not just very easy to submit multiple submissions. It's not just possible, it is extremely easy to do so. But one thing that I'm very happy to consider is the play plan. In my view, that's one of the best pieces of research this council has produced. It talked about the need in this particular area, and it made a valiant effort to engage young people in that discussion. That is one of the best pieces of research trying to engage young people. And we should not consider that effort in vain. I am not clairvoyant, but if nothing happens in this project and we keep kicking it down the road, eventually the money that we have with inflation and political changes won't be enough to cover the cost, like we have seen with other projects. If we leave it after the election, the political will might just disappear. So maybe councillors, we just need to be a bit brave and encourage, and we have to vote for what we believe. And I encourage every councillor in here to represent all their constituents, not just their voters. And for this reason, I think it's important that we consider this amendment.
Thank you, Jessie. And just to continue on this amendment, does anybody else want to speak for the amendment? Adrian?
Thanks, Chair. In supporting that amendment, I've got a few questions of my own about some of the items in the report, which I would like to raise. But I think the central sort of message that we're been getting from the speakers before the meeting and through the report is that there's a lot of support for a pump track, but the opposition is focused on not wanting a pump track in this place at this time. So when the corporate director talks about the fear of this first one being a destination and what the impacts of that are, I would have to say that that's going to be the case wherever you build the first one. As Councillor Jagger says, you know, the actual reaction from each different place is, you know, is going to be some people will support it and some people won't, and we have to take a decision one way or another. What I didn't fully understand from the corporate director was who's going to pay for the second one, because the first one, you know, if we've got the indicative cost of 60,000, which is the envelope within which this one can be built, then we haven't got the money for a second one anyway. There's nothing lined up in the capital spend for that. So if we don't do one, then, you know, we're not going to get underway with any of them. I think that, therefore, that we need to make a start somewhere, and the work has been, you know, considerably advanced on this particular area, and so that's a very good reason to proceed on this. I think there's another thing that comes through the consultation, which is some concerns that the site is somewhat secluded, so there are concerns about what the impact of having a lot of young people there together in an open space with no great oversight. This could be a problem. The other half of the consultation says we want the place to be overlooked, but they're complaining about the noise that it's going to create. So there's a lot of inconsistencies throughout the consultation on what it is that people actually want. I think I was interested to see that the planners suddenly discovered that it's in the middle of a battlefield site. I hope that they knew that it was already in a battlefield site before they offered your initial advice. But in paragraph 2.21, there's nothing there that screams out to me what are these archaeological monuments and concerns that are going to prevent a track being built, and, you know, given the nature of the build of the track. I don't know what the foundation levels are going to be like. Not entirely sure what it requires to build a pump track. That's not evident from this report, but I would be interested to know what the precise details of that archaeological concern are, because I would no doubt share some of them, but also the mitigating factors around it. And so I think that's, you know, surely that's something we can work through. What the overall concern I've got is that this needs to be part of an overall citywide piece of work. So I do think it's important that the element of the paragraph 1.2, which talks about instructing officers to undertake work in other locations, and we've already seen from the consultation responses and our own minds perhaps that those other locations need not be restricted to the 4 or 5 listed in the report, and that there are others. That work continues, but it needs to continue in association and in conjunction with work developing this one, because I think our experience in other areas is that we stop something happening in one place and we pick it up and try and translocate it somewhere else, then it simply doesn't work. It stops, full stop, and we do need to progress this.
Thank you very much, Lloyd, for sharing the report, and also a big thanks to the members of the public for turning up and speaking about the feelings within the community about this. So I think what I would like to say, and perhaps I might have a chance to speak about the report and the recommendations a little bit more further down the line, is that as much as I would like to give credit to colleagues speaking immediately before me, they seem to be in full electioneering swing themselves. And whereas they admit that there are issues with consultation, young people not being consulted, so on and so forth, they're quite happy to progress with something which clearly needs more work when it comes to consultation. So I genuinely do not understand, unless they have some kind of political motives by any chance. So as far as I'm concerned, I was happy to see this report when it was published, because it basically reiterated what I said in public in this meeting last time we met as the committee here, which essentially was that it's a great idea. We should have an ambition to build more than one, and in terms of the money, it's the case of us prioritizing how the money is spent. But for all kinds of reasons, and I've got a big old long list of those reasons, it's not the right place. And I'm speaking as a former buttonholer, 7 years living in the ward, someone who takes kids to someone who represents the adjacent ward in Buttonhole, but also someone who takes kids to the only existing pump track very close to the vicinity of the city boundaries in Rushwick. So I'll take my son there. He loves it. So I'm feeling really disappointed that whereas we acknowledge issues with the consultation process, you know, people clicking all kinds of answers, God knows how many times. When we say that young people were not heard, well, what does it, you know, let's get them heard, right? And also indication that the cost of doing it somewhere else, accessibility, real issues of accessibility are being sort of disregarded. We should really carefully, and goodness knows, and Lloyd and other officers know that I'm not shy to speak against recommendations of the senior officers. In this case, I think it's the right thing. I said it last time, I'm saying again, we need to rethink it. When it comes to young people, one quick sort of observation, a knife attack on a young person in the vicinity of the place, which took place last year, hasn't been resolved. So, or you know, I'm not comfortable with downplaying this, how serious it is, and therefore it requires further consideration. So, I do applaud. Let's put it this way: I do not envy officers. I do not envy us, quite frankly, because it's a bit of a Brexit issue. It looks like. But I'm really asking and reminding colleagues that this is not about the politics, what looks good on your leaflet. It's about the kids and what they have or what they don't have. And I'm speaking as a dad as well as a councillor. Thank you.
It's difficult to sum up what I need to say here this evening, because there's clearly there's a range of emotions that have been expressed this evening regarding views from the public, from all sides. But I'll try to sum it as best as I can, Chair. I mean, I think the decision tonight, I mean, we've only seen a recent survey in in the Worcester News and the national headlines that Worcester is one of the best places to live in the UK in terms of quality of life. But according to who? According, to middle-aged men, middle-aged women. Is it the best place to live according to young people? Have we ever done that survey? We haven't done that survey. We don't know what, and our own consultations and our own internal audits have revealed that there is a considerable lack of facilities and play provision for youth provision between the ages of 12 and 16 and 17. So we've identified that need. We've identified a need that we have consistently overlooked, the need to address these issues for youth provision. I, as a local councillor and a running of a youth group, know that the direct link between increase in antisocial behaviour and lack of facilities. As soon as a youth club closes or a facility isn't provided, antisocial behaviour increases. And that you can say that is a level, what's it called, a consistent picture in all wards across the city. Wherever there's a lack of facilities, antisocial behaviour increases. One of the speakers earlier spoke really, really eloquently regarding that link, that people need a provision to play, to exercise, to release those energies that they can develop into well-rounded individuals when they grow up. This location here, I mean, we've heard consistently here that there's been a flaw and somehow there's been a flaw in our public consultations. Well, I mean, it wouldn't have got to this stage if our public consultations weren't as thorough as possible. And there's also, noises coming from the floor that the previous councillors chose this location, literally just, putting this drop on the pin. This has been considered by the parish council. This has been considered by previous councillors, and they've come up with a location that is deemed suitable. This is a juncture. This location is a juncture between a high school, two local, primary schools, and it's a key location in terms of kids using the track. It'll benefit not only St Peter's residents, it'll benefit Baton Hall residents, it'll benefit Cathedral residents, and it'll benefit Nunnery residents. It is a key location that hundreds and hundreds of kids use on a daily basis to commute from their homes to their schools and use as a play facility. Now, the decision being made here this evening is much bigger than a few votes at the local election. The vote here tonight is about whether we back young people and their facilities, that we back young people and that we believe in young people and we're going to invest in young people. That's the decision here tonight. Not the local elections that however many votes that you might miss out because some local residents complain. The bigger picture is our faith being tested in young people here tonight. And I believe, and I'll give you an example. Last year we've got some funding for a cricket pitch. We got funding for a cricket pitch, and the original location was in Claines, if you don't mind me asking. Local people kicked up a fuss. Oh, a cricket pitch in our local park that's supposed to benefit the whole city. A free cricket pitch, the first municipal cricket pitch in this city, was battered away. Thankfully, we found a better place to put it in. That it's hundreds and hundreds of kids are now being able to use it. But this is the local opposition that we're getting for facilities that we're trying to provide for young people and for sports enthusiasts that encourage play, that encourage cohesion, yet get batted back because we're too afraid to make those brave decisions. So the brave decision today here is actually standing up for young people and supporting this amendment here today. Thank you.
Chair, thanks very much. I've heard some extremely compelling, powerful arguments, both from the people who are in the public spaces and also from around this table. The question for me is this. I've been on this council for a number of years, and we periodically, not often enough, go back to the level of provision that we have for young people. Truth of the matter is, it's not enough. Now, I'm not suggesting that any one of the locations suggested are perfect. They're not. We don't live in a perfect world. And I totally understand the depth of feeling that some people have about developments of this sort But nevertheless, it is still something that will be of enormous value to young people in the area. I think there will be scope as time goes on for alternatives and additional facilities to emerge in other areas of the city, so that not one particular area doesn't become the destination area. It simply provides a facility for young people in it, not necessarily strictly in St Peter's or Battenhall, but within that particular part of the city. Clearly, ultimately, there are tough choices to be made, and this particular project was something that former Councillor McKay was extremely passionate about. We've spoken about this on a number of occasions. I do not want to see this lost in a new civic year, new members coming to the table, many different priorities that will occupy their minds as we go forward. And I absolutely applaud the idea that council officers now should open up a dialogue with those people who are, clearly have got some concerns about this. We can work together to allay those fears, I am sure. And for that reason, and for many others, I will support the amendment.
Chair, I've listened to the debate so far, and obviously continue to listen to it until we vote. I think I'd summarise my views as the perfect is often the enemy of the good, because I think if we're looking for a perfect site, we're going to take, we're not going to find one, I would suggest to colleagues. From looking at the report, I've been working this for over 3 years now. It was put in the budget, which would have had to go in the draft budget back in 2020 for proposals 21-22. So over 3 years we've been developing as an authority proposals for this particular area. And of course it is important to engage and consult with the community, and we would expect differences of opinion. And I think I am persuaded on balance by Jessie's amendment, because I think the key aspect there is, whilst in principle moving ahead, we must continue to engage with local people in the area about how we can mitigate any impact. That's the important bit, I think, having listened to Jessie's proposal. And so I am persuaded on that basis that we need to make a clear decision. I'm not persuaded on deferment simply to make further investigations, because I think we won't find a perfect site in the city that will accommodate that. And I'm not persuaded that one site in the future of the city, the size and growing nature of the city, will also be suitable. So one destination pump track for the entire city of Worcester is probably not what I would think is best envisaged. This should be the first pump track to serve this locality, but we should continue to examine, as Jessie has said, other facilities, other suitable sites. But I would say to colleagues, if we spent over 3 years getting to this proposition, we are likely in any other area of the city to have to undertake very similar engagement and consultation and come across, again, mixed views, which will have to be mitigated. We'll have to look at how we can deal with those conflicting issues in a community, which won't be perfect. So in summary, Chair, I think that I am persuaded to support the amendment, because I think the perfect site perhaps will not be found, and therefore we won't move forward with any facilities for a size and scale of Worcester City with its expansion areas, which I don't think is right for the future of the city. I think we do need to make a decision as a committee. In terms of budget as well, costs are not going to go down. You know, we've seen the quite extraordinary inflation in build costs and developments. In any other site, there will have to be the kind of engagement in the community work that would be done. And there would no doubt be issues about ecology, heritage and history, accessibility, transport, etc., which will all have to be overcome. And I think what would be really awful is to exhaust a future provision in this budget and actually not build anything for the city and the future residents, whether they be our existing young people or future generations. So I think on balance, whilst hearing very loud and clearly some of the local concern in the area and fully understanding that, I do think we should seek to move ahead, and therefore on balance I am persuaded at this moment to support the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm so heartened to hear the child advocacy that's just been shared in the in however long that this debate is going on. That makes me So positive and so happy. A week ago, I sat here in Health and Wellbeing Committee and we heard from a public health consultant, and we all wrung our hands over the quite worrying level of health and the indicators across the city. And we all said, what can we do about cardiovascular disease, and what can we do about loneliness, and what can we do about air pollution, all those sorts of things. And then you open the paper and you read about the mental health crisis that's occurring for children right now, and you're hearing about children with weakened bones because they've not had chance to exercise and get outside. And it's quite obvious that what our children need is the opportunity to be able to get outside in their own city and independently, which is why the council's work with the play strategy is so very, very positive. And I continue to urge the council to be bold, to be ambitious, to make sure they're doing the very best things for children. It's notable that as a society, anti-child sentiment is actually incredibly acceptable, and we really must challenge that, because that is not good enough. I have a couple of points because, frankly, none of this is good enough. None of it is good enough, because we're still too far from having good enough play provision in this city, and that is what has ended up with me being in this position, is that our provision in Worcester is pathetic for young people, and I'm so glad that we're going forward with the strategy and plans for that. Now, I dispute a couple of the claims that have been brought up already, so to offer some reassurances. So I'm not sure, there's a lot of talk about this site becoming a destination site, and I wonder if we've worried ourselves with that, because we already have a destination site, if you'd like to call it that, with Rushwick you can drive to. We already have a BMX skateboarding track at Purd as well, so perhaps those are the ones we can drive to if we have to. And also, don't forget, it's the government's target that by 2030, 50% of journeys are made on foot or wheeled, so hopefully those parking problems won't be an issue by the time the pump track's built anyway. But my two concerns, and this is why I really appreciate how Councillor Jagger spoke and the amendment, but I'm still not convinced, because my two issues are speed of delivery. I'm motivated by what gets us a pump track quickest or more play provision quickest. And I'm really concerned by point 2.21 and 2.22 and this archaeological issues that may be presented, because I'm worried that pushing forward with Batten Hall Park doesn't result in more play provision in the quickest way possible. So I need further assurances about timeframes in this, because as we sit around and talk, children's childhoods are dripping away. My son was 4 when we first started talking about pump tracks. He's possibly going to be, on this time scale, 10 before we maybe get one. We already heard another example here. It's not good enough. And then also, I have another question that led me to go all the way back and watch the YouTube video of the PED committee meeting of the 24th of January 2022, which was about why these projects, two projects that we talk about today actually, Pump Track and Cotswold Way, why they've managed to sort of leapfrog and come out of place with the play strategy. And I found there was a vote on that. And in fact, I listened to a really brilliant point by, because it's not my original point, so I can't claim it, Councillor Joe Hodges made the point that we should not be agreeing to projects before the strategic plan was in place, because where does it fit? Is this for the best interest of young people? Committee disagreed with her, and it was agreed that things should go through. But this actually is a strategic failure. We should have waited. We should have assessed the needs across the city. We should have thought about where things needed to go for the best interests of young people. So at the moment, I still don't know, Chair. And that's where we are, because none of it is quite what I want.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, from the point of view of the existing timeline, the kind of current tenders that are available are kind of expire after 120 days, so we are still within the period at the moment. We would have to go back, obviously, and kind of update those with the companies. But from the point of view of the archaeological work, the process that we've just currently undergone with regards to Purdeswell Leisure Centre has been quite a a kind of quite short time period. So we've got the written scheme of investigation back very, very quickly. Ironically enough, we've got the archaeological survey at Purdeswell taking place tomorrow and the following day. So they'll be digging 4 trial pits. So we'll be in a quite a similar situation. Obviously, the one element that we don't have clarity on at this stage, if the vote tonight is to go ahead, is the consultation with Historic England and what the implications of that may be. So I kind of see what I've said on that basis. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the archaeological work through the county service, it shouldn't be time intensive at all in that respect.
I've got a sort of general question. There's been questions raised about the consultation and how valid, how genuine each of the responses is. Has there been an opportunity for anybody technical to go and investigate how many are questionable, should we say? How many dodgy responses have we got? Because there is, you know, a fair bit of feeling in the room about the amount of opposition from the online survey and other places. How much of that is still valid in this context? I feel.
We've not got sophisticated analysis software, or we've not had the capacity to go through in any great detail. So I think you only have to spend a little time perhaps seeing duplicate efforts. But to put a number on it or give you a feel, Councillor Zero, we've not got there. We've not got to that point.
Just for the record, I'm not anti-bike, I'm not anti-pump track, I'm not anti-play. In fact, my passion for outdoor facilities for children and older children is, you know, in Worcester we are woefully inadequate with what we offer our children, particularly those in the 11+ age range. In fact, we need more skateboard parks, more pump tracks, the more the better. However, I do have great concerns about the consultation that has taken place and also the location. And I know that's going against the room, but I can only express as a ward councillor my work that I've done in the ward. And just to give you an insight, since I was elected, because there has been no consultation with children directly in the ward, none at all, absolutely none. So when this scheme was announced many years ago, no consultation was done with residents and none with children. So I've spoken to 56 children so far and had various responses. But just to give you a flavour of just a couple of children, Jack is 10 years of age and he's in a motorised wheelchair. He would like to be able to use a pump track, but he says that he won't be able to use the one in Batten Hall because his parents will need to drive him there in his specially adapted car, and he needs a ramp for access to get out of the car. Because there is no disabled car parking space, he's worried that he will be blocked in and will not be able to use the park. You might say he's only one child, but one child not being able to access a play area is pretty damning, really. Katie and Emily are 11 and 12. They don't like to go into Batten Hall Park and will not go in Batten Hall Park because it's not safe. There is not enough lighting, and their question is, why do boys always get things to do and girls don't? Why doesn't anybody ever ask us? Similarly, 2 residents, Alan and Peter in St Peter's, I asked them their age and they said they're the wrong side of 70. They live in St Peter's and they have grandchildren and great-grandchildren who come to stay. They will need to use their car in order to access Batten Hall Park to take their grandchildren and great-grandchildren because they are not able to walk there themselves with them. So they will be using their car. The issue with Batten Hall Park is that it is the first one in Worcester, and, you know, we have to be concerned about the accessibility of that, because it's easy to say that everyone can cycle there, and that's great in a perfect world. But there are many people who are going to travel from the St John's, for example. Are we saying that all those people have got to cycle in order to use a pump track that is the only pump track in Worcester? What about those elderly grandparents who need to take their grandchildren to play in the pump track? How are they going to do that? There are going to be lots of cars parked in residential streets which are already rammed full of parents picking their children up from schools and so on. It's going to be very, very difficult for them. They also have concerns about the emergency services. If we have cars parked in 2 residential cul-de-sacs and God forbid an accident happens, how will an ambulance have access to the streets in order to get to those children that have been hurt? Because accidents happen, they're rare, but they happen. And how will an accident and the emergency services get there? I'm concerned that the ecological report, we're not able to see that. And that has been one of my biggest concerns about the environmental impact. We're not able to see that report. I know we have officers' reassurances that that will be made available to us. Why can't we have it now? Again, there's no transparency about the costings. We're saying that it comes in on budget, which is fine. How much of that budget is dead money to access the site to build the pump track? Because the only way that that pump track can be built and accessed is from Batten Hall Road, which is about 400 metres. Now, I know that when I met with the officer, there was talk, well, we'll have to close Batten Hall Park because of health and safety and what have you, and a sizable amount of the budget allocated will be spent on paying for transportation costs to get the equipment from Batten Hall Road right down to the location, which is inaccessible by car. It's a long way. So isn't it better to spend the money, that's dead money, on using it to go into a pump track that's in an accessible location and we're not wasting money? Isn't it better to spend it wisely? It's taxpayers' money at the end of the day. And I'm also concerned about flooding in the area. That part of Batten Hall Park floods all the time. Every time we have rainfall, it floods. So how much of the costs of building the pump track are going to be spent on flood defences or making it so that it can be usable? I'd like to just know that information. And I think so at the moment, I don't support the amendment that it goes straight away and we be brave and put it in Batten Hall Park, because I think a lot more work needs to be done. It's no good saying now that we need to consult with residents. We should have consulted with residents right at the very beginning. The horse has already bolted out the stable now. Because of the lack of consultation right at the very beginning of this project has left a vacuum which has been filled by misinformation and God knows what. Unfortunately, the damage has now been done, and I think we need to defer and we need to look at other locations. I'm not saying that we take Batten Hall Park out of the equation completely. I would just like to have more information and to see more work done.
As I say, it's a little bit chicken and egg, and I think where we were is having something meaningful to consult on was probably a better option in order to draw out comments about a specific location than consulting on something which perhaps is a bit more vague. And what we've done, having done some preliminary investigation work and identified the location, what we feel we have done is put a consultation in front of local residents and a number of wider stakeholders so that they could then actually comment on a more precise project. And just in terms of the environmental survey, as we've said, this project, the advice is that it doesn't require planning approval, so therefore it doesn't require a planning application to be submitted. We were very conscious of the area and the nature of the site, so that's why we undertook the environmental survey. And I think one of the points made earlier was around perhaps the impact on biodiversity. As we've done with the Purdeswell project, if we were to proceed with this site, we would want as a council to ensure that there was 10% biodiversity net gain. So, you know, we build that into the project. But just to reassure members, the reason we haven't included it within the report tonight is because the recommendation was to defer, or is to defer. But we can provide that report to members following the committee, but just to reassure, there was nothing significant that was raised within that report.
I just feel this consultation is, this report is underdeveloped, and I feel that that's disappointing given that it's been 3 years. I would have liked to have seen it Historic England consulted beforehand. We know it's on a battlefield, and the work going on with the 3G pitch in Purdeswell and the playgrounds already on the site are quite different because this will be an extra layer of landscaping. So really, my question is, what's the quickest way to get a pump track built in Worcester? That would really help me with my vote. I am still undecided. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the question, Hannah, because it nicely leads into my point, which you would think that we'd actually been communicating, and we haven't. The proposed amendment, I think, in many respects, on face value, is fantastic. Wonderful. I totally agree with the sentiment behind it. However, I have spoken with, and I have met with, and I have heard from residents who you have also heard from today, and they will absolutely not take this lying down, and they will absolutely not consider mitigation of a pump track being built in Batten Hall Park. And I know that they will be looking at their options legally in terms of how they can prevent this from happening, and even to the extent of judicial review. So, in terms of getting a pump track built quickest, my opinion is that going down this route will actually prevent a pump track from being built in Batten Hall Park, and I think that the deferment and looking at other locations will be the quickest way to actually have a fantastic facility for kids, which is what we all want.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I think we heard from, I mean, I don't know if I've misconstrued the comments there, but I took it as a bit of a threat. I think, I mean, the threat that our consultation wasn't sound or satisfactory or to standard, and that we weren't following procedure. So can somebody bring some light on that? Because if there's a potential judicial review being instigated by that, I'd like to understand from our legal team where we stand on our consultation. And the other part of my question is that the officers highlighted, Lloyd's highlighted, that 70% of consultees responded that they would like a what's called pump track in this location. So are we saying now, all of a sudden, 75% for a pump track in favour in this location, that we're saying that we're going to ignore all those people that have said yes, because it doesn't suit us, or it doesn't suit certain members? I mean, I don't know how else to interpret a consultation that we've gone out to ask the general public, and 70% of those respondents have said they want it in that location. How else would you interpret it?
So the decision to identify new play provision in the city is, of course, a discretionary function of the City Council. The City Council has, therefore, quite a high degree of discretion about the procedure that it follows in deciding whether to invest its resources. It must always do so prudently and having regard to all relevant considerations. That often does mean conducting a consultation exercise, but it also means taking information from a range of sources, and the report does not funnel the reader into thinking that the consultation is the only form of information that members should take into account when making their decision. So the committee should have regard to all matters that it considers relevant and disregard any irrelevant ones. We've clearly not been put on any notice of a judicial review, so I cannot comment any further on that at this point, Chair.
I'd like to clarify some of the points regarding the online survey. My personal view is that I attribute no weight whatsoever to the online survey, good or bad, because in my view, the whole survey was flawed. Online surveys, anonymous surveys, are at best self-reported, biased, in the added notion that you have an issue of people submitting multiple answers is a problem. So, for me, it's not an issue of how many people supported it on that online survey, and I think that we have some discretion as to whether we decide based on the need in the area. My understanding and reading on the play plan is that one of the reasons that Batten Hall was selected was because there was need in the area. So there was no representations of what residents wanted or not. With regards with residents not, taking it lying down or complaining, that will happen in every single ward. Every single ward you will have a loud resident threatening to sue, saying that they don't want it in their area. We will have this battle. Whether we go everywhere in the city, we will have this battle. And at some point, we are selected by the residents, not just by the people who vote. We represent all of them. And yes, I realize that sometimes we accuse politicians of being political, as if, you know, there are political decisions to be made, but the reality is we don't have a choice of one pump track over a better pump track. We have one pump track or potentially no pump track, because we don't know what's going to happen in May. We have no idea who's going to be in this chamber. We don't know if the money is going to be enough. And I realize that there are problems with the location, and I realize that it's easy for me to say, oh, be brave in the area that is not the area with the residents coming to me. I get that. But at the same time, if we put it off, no kids will have a pump track anywhere, because we're just going to have this conversation over and over and over again. So sometimes we have to use our discretions as elected officials. We are representative democracy. Not everything has to be a referendum. And so we have to choose. And my view is that we have to make progress on that, pending on certain conditions. So looking at how we might mitigate it. And some people are going to be upset. Some people are not going to come along with that. That is always going to happen. But if we're always going to make try to make everybody happy, we'll never get anything done. That's it.
I just want to speak to the couple of points made about the involvement of young people in the consultation process. So if you look into Appendix 1, page 23, question 2, you will note that considering the age groups, the age 13 between 17 is relatively small. I've also raised, not talking about the pump track, about a different constellation. I think we talked about the play strategy. That it's not only about the surveys; it's also about trying to get intelligence by engaging with relevant partners. So yes, environmental groups, but also groups that represent people with disabilities. On the basis of the local knowledge, and I'll be very, very happy whether we can do this before the vote or whatever, to show you what the area looks like. It's suitable for water sports, not for cycling on a pump track. It really is, 30, 40 meters from the proposed location. So it's not about NIMBYism. It's about what's best for the city. I've heard all kinds of sort of hypothetical things being said, but so as far as I can say, the officers are not saying that the options proposed for consideration are mutually exclusive. So it's not that we are saying no to Badenhall. We are simply asking to take a very serious look at other areas. My personal preference would be for a site on the south of A44, because it's under underprovided, I suppose, when it comes to the provision. That would be my personal perspective. It's very difficult to get to. There are all kinds of lovely, good things which will preserve that area of the city from developers encroaching on it, including cricket. It really is one of the things that potentially the city council could do something about, or some kind of use of the green spaces for play activities. But once again, and if you want to, we can share the photos before or after. It's not suitable location. It's as simple as that. I said it last time, and it's not about me being right or not. It's just not. The idea is great. It's not the right place for it. And I'm saying as somebody who lived there for 7 years, I'm saying somebody who knows what it's like to take a 4-year-old wading through, wellies and all that bit. It's not the right place. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Chair, if I may, I thought I'd heard Councillor Jagger sum up. Can we not move to the vote instead of keeping repeating the same arguments?
Thank you, Adrian. I was just about to make the same point.
So I asked about what's the quickest way to get a pump track, and I didn't hear that answer. So that would really help me in my voting. Thank you.
I think taking everything into account of where we are sat right now, that the practically quickest way to achieve a pump track would be to proceed with the Badenhall Park proposal.
The January meeting that you referred to, I was a member of the committee at that point, and I voted with my group, and I As a nice, loyal politician, I would be. But that was under the understanding that Batten Hall Park and Cotswold Way would only be considered after the play strategy had been agreed and after a clear demand had been identified. So I just wanted to make that point. So, Eleanor, on the basis that do you have anything new to add to the debate, or are we going to just rehash something?
All I wanted to say is we are asking for a deferment of just 5 months, which would just give officers time to consult with, is it Rural England? And, you know, it's just 5 months so that we can make sure we're just getting it right. And it would give them time to do the consultation that they need to do anyway with external stakeholders. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you.
This is because I just need it spelt out for me, okay? I'm the newest one here. Right, so if I vote with the original recommendation, we're halting work with Batten Hall. The tender will expire. So that will have expired, is that correct? 120 days. During that time, officers will investigate other sites, report back in June with the locations presented, and that's at that point still aiming for just one pump track. Is that correct?
Can I just add one thing, Chair? By the point we bring a report back to the next committee, for us to perhaps progress on from there, there may be a period of consultation required. So it may not be an approval to move straight to development. There may be, if there's a preferred site that members wish to indicate,
yep,
we would then need to go and do the consultation exercise, which we've already carried out as part of this.
Whereas if I vote with the amendment, we continue to progress with the Batten Hall Park location and at the same time investigate other sites. Still, thank you. Still with the idea that this will only result in one pump track, or is that a second pump track emerging?
That's potentially a second pump track.
Okay, and it's okay that that might have officer time and budget implications. That's
So the point around budget was raised earlier. As part of the 2023 report, £400,000 has been approved through Community Infrastructure Levy for play projects.
So I'd like to take a vote on the amendment by Jessie, if I may. So all those in favour of Jessie's amendment, please indicate.